Sunday brunch had always been a tradition in our family ever since the children were young. It began as a simple way to keep us connected during busy years of schoolwork and growing lives. Now that they were all adults with lives of their own, it had become a once a month ritual, polished, rehearsed, and politely strained. That morning, I arrived at Julie's house, my eldest daughter's home, carrying a paper bag of almond croissants from the French bakery I knew everyone liked. I had ironed my blouse the night before, added a soft pink scarf for warmth, and wore the necklace my late husband gave me on our 20th anniversary. It made me feel a little less invisible. Julie opened the door halfway before turning back into the house, calling over her shoulder. "Mom's here." No hug, no smile, just the announcement. I walked in slowly, careful not to let the warmth in the bag escape too quickly. The house smelled of rosemary and orange zest. The long dining table was set already cloth napkins folded into tidy triangles, mimosa glasses clinking in soft toasts between siblings. Julie's husband, Mark, gave me a nod. My son, David, glanced up from his phone. My youngest, Lila, waved gently. I placed the croissants by the fruit platter and took my usual seat near the end of the table. I poured myself coffee from the carafe, added a little cream, and stirred slowly, pretending not to notice that no one asked how I was doing or if I had slept well or how the train ride had been. I'd stopped hoping for those questions years ago. Conversations bounced between vacation plans, work projects, and school updates for the grandkids. Julie was talking about the Europe trip they were planning in August, France, Italy, and a few days in Switzerland. I hadn't heard about it before, so I smiled and asked quietly, "That sounds lovely. Have you picked the dates? I'd like to check my calendar. Maybe I can come along for part of it." There was a pause. Not a long one, just long enough. Julie set her mimosa down, turned to me slightly, and with a small, tight-lipped smile said, "Mom, we're just being nice, including you. Don't think you matter to the planning." Her voice was calm, her tone even, as if she were stating something obvious, helpful even. David cleared his throat but said nothing. Lila looked away, suddenly interested in peeling her orange slice. Mark reached for the salt. The silence that followed was worse than the sentence itself. I held the coffee cup in both hands, the porcelain warm against my palms. I took a sip, nodded once, and smiled just a little. "I see," I said. I folded my napkin slowly, placed it beside my plate, and stood up. No one stopped me. No one asked why I was leaving. I picked up my coat from the back of the chair, looped my scarf around my neck, and walked toward the door. As I opened it, I heard Julie laugh softly behind me, perhaps at something Mark said, perhaps not. The sun was bright outside. Brisk wind tugged gently at my scarf. I began walking, no destination in mind, only one thought ringing clear in my heart: I was never really invited. I had only been tolerated. And now, finally, I heard it said out loud. My name is Elaine. I'm 63 years old, a retired high school librarian, and a mother of 3. I live alone now in a small house not far from where my children grew up. It's quiet, peaceful most days. But silence has its own weight when it isn't chosen. I was never someone who demanded attention. Not as a girl, not as a wife, and certainly not as a mother. I come from a generation where women learned to care first and speak second. I married young. My husband Paul passed away when the kids were still in grade school, a sudden heart attack on a Thursday afternoon. I remember what I was cooking when I got the call: chicken stew with rosemary, the same scent I noticed at Julie's brunch. After Paul died, life shifted into a different gear. I worked extra hours at the school library, offered weekend tutoring, and found quiet ways to stretch every dollar. I clipped coupons, bought groceries in bulk, learned how to fix a leaking sink from a book checked out of my own library. Every decision I made had one goal: keep my children's lives as steady as possible. Julie was the oldest, always the brightest, always the most ambitious. She organized her siblings like a tiny general even when she was 9. David, the middle child, was gentle and a little reserved. He loved building things. Lila, my youngest, arrived when I was already exhausted, but softened all our lives with her laughter. They grew up with clean clothes, packed lunches, and a mother who never missed a school event, even if I came straight from work with my hair pulled back in a rushed bun. I never remarried. I told myself I didn't have time, but the truth was simpler. I didn't want anyone else taking up the space their father once filled. That space became theirs entirely. Even when they were grown, I stayed close. Not in a smothering way, I hope, but in the quiet ways mothers do, helping Lila with her first apartment lease, babysitting Julie's kids so she could attend late meetings, proofreading David's graduate school essays. I never asked for anything in return. Not gifts, not recognition, just a sense that I still mattered. I paid off the mortgage on the family home by myself. When I sold it, I split a portion of the earnings between the kids just to give them a little cushion. I thought it would make them feel supported, maybe even proud. But somewhere along the line, I became part of the wallpaper. Julie is a successful marketing executive now. She drives a silver SUV, hosts elaborate brunches, and talks about managing optics in nearly every conversation. I admire her confidence, even if it sometimes borders on arrogance. To her, I am a guest in the life she curated. Helpful, perhaps, but not necessary. David teaches engineering at a university. He's often distracted and too busy to remember birthdays, but I've never doubted that he has a good heart. He just doesn't always know how to use it when it matters. Lila is the freest spirit of the three. She travels for work, changes apartments frequently, and lives mostly in moments. She sends postcards from airport layovers and photos of meals from cafes I'll never visit. She is affectionate, but fleeting. They are all grown now, successful in their own ways. They invite me to gatherings, mention me in passing, and send flowers on holidays. But when it comes to decisions, to meaning, to purpose, I'm no longer part of the foundation. I'm something set to the side. That morning at brunch was not a singular wound. It was simply the latest cut in a long series of small ones, a final echo of what I had begun to feel for years, that somewhere along the way I went from being essential to optional. Still, I hadn't expected to hear it said so plainly, so cleanly, like a glass door closing between us. I went home that day, took off my coat, and stood in the kitchen for a long time. I looked at the pie I had planned to bake for Julie's kids and set the ingredients back in the cupboard. Something inside me had shifted. There is a peculiar kind of grief that doesn't arrive all at once but trickles in over time. Not the kind that knocks you off your feet, but the kind that wears you down slowly, like a leaky faucet echoing in the night, one drop at a time, until you realize you haven't truly slept in years. That's what my motherhood had become. It started with little things too small to confront without sounding petty. A birthday dinner once filled with candles and laughter reduced to a group text. "We're doing dinner for David's birthday at 7. Can you bring dessert?" "No." "Would you like to join us?" "No." "We've missed you." "Just a request." "Bring something sweet." Then step to the side. Holidays became more about scheduling than sentiment. Julie once moved Christmas dinner 2 days early because her in-laws booked first. No one asked if I could rearrange my work hours at the library to attend. When I said I couldn't make it, Lila said, "We'll FaceTime you." One Easter, I arrived with a basket of handmade treats, chocolate nests I'd stayed up the night before creating. No one touched them. Julie had ordered a dessert tower from a boutique bakery, and my little effort was quietly pushed aside, wrapped in plastic, and saved for later. It never returned to the table. The comments stung, too subtle, dressed as jokes, but sharp nonetheless. "Mama, you wouldn't know how to use Venmo." "It's fine, I'll just pay for it. Don't worry about the itinerary. You get confused with all the details anyway. Let us handle the financial stuff. You're from a different time. I am educated. I managed our entire household budget after Paul died. I handled 2 mortgages, insurance paperwork, and tax filings while raising 3 children on a teacher's salary. But in their eyes, I'm someone who should be protected from the modern world seen as quaint, maybe even a little fragile. They assume that because I don't argue, I must not understand. I remember one Sunday in particular. We were gathered at Julie's house again, and she was speaking about a business trip to San Francisco. "I'll be giving the keynote at the tech conference," she said, not looking at me. "It's a big deal. I might get quoted in Forbes." I clapped lightly. "That's wonderful, Julie. Your father would have been so proud." She didn't look up. "Yeah, well, it's been a lot of hard work. Some people don't understand how much goes into something like this." David nodded in agreement. "Everyone just sees the result. They don't see the 20-hour weeks." I smiled gently. "When you were in middle school, I used to stay up until 100 a.m. sewing costumes for your school plays, then wake at 5:30 to make your lunch." Julie blinked, then laughed. "That was different. You were just being a mom. Just being a mom." I remember the way those 4 words settled in the pit of my stomach like a cold stone, as though all those years of effort, love, and exhaustion had been demoted to something incidental. Even the grandchildren whom I adored started to echo that casual dismissal. Not out of cruelty, but because children learn what they are shown. "Grandma, why do you always wear the same shoes? Grandma, are you too old to come on the roller coaster? Grandma Mom says you get confused with directions." They weren't trying to hurt me, but they were repeating what they heard. Still, I stayed. I attended the birthdays, brought pies to Thanksgiving, watered Julie's houseplants when she traveled, helped David research private schools for his son, and sent Lila surprise care packages with chamomile tea and hand lotion. Each act of care was sincere. But slowly, I began to realize no one asked me how I was doing. No one asked if I was tired, or lonely, or simply wanted to be seen for more than what I could still provide. When I turned 60, there was no party, no dinner. Lila sent a bottle of wine. Julie sent a group card, half of which was signed by her kids with "Love you, Grandma" in purple marker. David forgot until I reminded him a week later. He texted, "Happy belated, hope it was nice." It wasn't cruel. That's what made it worse. It was indifferent. And indifference, I've come to believe, is more painful than any deliberate act of meanness. Because it tells you this. You could vanish, and nothing would shift. That's what had been building over the years. Small acts, quiet slights, smiles that didn't reach the eyes, words that patronized, celebrations where I stood off to the side clutching my handbag like a coat of invisibility. Until brunch. Until Julie looked me in the eye and said aloud what I had long suspected. "We're just being nice, including you. Don't think you matter." It wasn't just what she said. It was that no one disagreed. Not even Lila, who once cried in my arms when her college boyfriend broke her heart. Not even David, who used to fall asleep on my shoulder during thunderstorms. In that moment, every accumulated hurt, every overlooked kindness, every slight and smirk and silence came crashing together like pieces of glass rearranging into something sharper. That's when I knew. I had become a guest in my own family. It was time to start packing up. It was a sunny Sunday in early May, the kind of morning that almost makes you believe everything is as it should be. The light spilled across the driveway as I walked up to Julie's front porch, balancing a small box of homemade lemon scones. I had baked them the night before using my mother's old recipe. It felt like a small offering, something warm, something familiar, something that said, "I still care." Inside the house buzzed with voices. The smell of fresh coffee and rosemary potatoes lingered in the air. Julie's table was laid out beautifully as always, linen napkins, glass pitchers of orange juice, her collection of mismatched antique plates. She had an eye for presentation. I'd always admired that. "Mom, there you are," she called, brushing a quick kiss across my cheek. "Go ahead and set those over there. We already have muffins, but it's nice you brought something." I smiled, placing the scones near the fruit platter, then found my usual spot at the far end of the table between the window and the unused high chair that still sat there, even though the youngest was nearly 5. David was talking about refinancing his house. Lila was scrolling through pictures on her phone, occasionally showing one to her partner. Julie poured mimosas, laughing at something her son had said. No one looked at me, but that wasn't new. Eventually, the conversation shifted toward summer plans. So the Switzerland trip is locked, and Julie announced, clinking her mimosa glass lightly. We're flying out July 10th. We've booked the chalet near the lake, 2 full weeks, all of us together. She looked down the table with pride. Well, I said gently, I might need to check my schedule. There's a library event I promised to help with that week. Maybe I could fly out a little later. There was a pause, a small one, but it felt longer than it was. Julie turned to me, eyebrows raised. Oh, Mom, she said with a small, patronizing smile. You thought you were coming. Her voice wasn't harsh. It was light, casual, but the silence that followed was loud. I looked around. David shifted uncomfortably. Lila pretended to stir her tea. Julie laughed softly, then said the words I'd never forget. We're just being nice, including you. Don't think you matter. It was said with the kind of ease that suggested this wasn't a new thought, just one finally spoken aloud. Something inside me went very still. My fingers rested on the edge of the plate, tracing the smooth porcelain. I could feel the weight of years behind her words. All the times I was invited last, considered last, treated like someone who could come along only if it didn't disrupt the plans. Not as a person to be included, but as a courtesy. For appearances. The kind of invitation you extend because you feel obligated, not because you want someone there. I looked at Julie. Her expression hadn't changed. There was no malice, just mild irritation, as if I were a child interrupting adult conversation. I took a sip of my coffee. It was lukewarm now, bitter. I see, I said softly. I stood up, folding my napkin slowly. No one stopped me. No one asked where I was going. David glanced up briefly but said nothing. Lila looked toward the window. I walked over to the counter, picked up the small glass container I had brought the scones in, and quietly placed the uneaten ones inside. Thank you for brunch, I said gently to no one in particular. Then I walked out. The sunlight was still there, but it didn't feel warm anymore. I sat in my car for a long time before starting the engine. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel angry. Just tired. Not tired in my bones, but tired in my spirit. A kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from too many years of showing up where you are barely seen. For the first time, I didn't wonder what I had done wrong. For the first time, I wondered what would happen if I simply stopped. Stopped trying. Stopped proving. Stopped bending myself to fit the shape of someone else's idea of who I should be. That afternoon, I went home and didn't say a word to anyone. But something had shifted. Something real. The next morning, I watered my plants with a steadier hand than usual. The African violets on the windowsill had started to bloom again, small, persistent things. Quiet, but unafraid of taking up space. I didn't go into battle mode after brunch. I didn't call anyone or write long messages. I didn't demand apologies or explanations. That wasn't the kind of mother I was, and it wasn't the kind of woman I wanted to become. What I did instead was simple. I began to leave quietly. The first thing I did was call the family's financial advisor. For the last decade, I had been a co-signer and silent guardian of the family accounts. When my husband died, I stepped into the role not out of ambition, but because someone had to keep the roof intact. The kids were still young, then still figuring out who they were. I made sure bills were paid, insurance was maintained, and college funds grew. But now I asked to have my name removed. The advisor hesitated. Are you sure, Mrs. Lane? Yes, I said, I no longer need to be part of decisions I'm not truly included in. He didn't ask more questions, just processed the paperwork. Next, I logged into the shared document folder that Julie and I had maintained for years: schedules, insurance copies, the emergency binder I'd started when my husband first got sick. I removed myself from editing permissions. Then I deleted the folder from my own drive. I looked at the binder on my desk, the one I'd built for the grandchildren's scholarship accounts, tracking interest growth, quarterly updates, tax filing copies. I had taken so much care with it. I closed it gently and set it aside. Then I called our family lawyer. I'd like to revise my role in the trust, I said. She was surprised, but respectful. I told her I no longer wanted to be listed as the fallback guardian for the estate if anything happened to my children. I wasn't angry. I just wanted legal clarity that I was not expected to fix things anymore. When the kids were young, I didn't mind being the net, the one beneath them. But they were grown, now capable of building their own nets. If they chose not to, that was their decision. It no longer had to be my burden. I sent an email to the board of the Neighborhood Scholarship Fund, something I had co-founded, something my daughter occasionally referenced in public speeches as part of our family's community legacy. I let them know I was stepping down from my chair position and would no longer be managing fundraising. No drama, no long explanation. Just a simple note that it was time for someone else to lead. At home, I opened the drawer by the fridge and removed the spare keys to Julie's house. One for the front door, one for the garage and the mailbox. She had given them to me when she first moved in during the chaos of remodeling and child pickups and lost Amazon packages. I placed them in a small envelope, wrote her name in neat cursive, then left it in her mailbox on my afternoon walk. No note inside, no need. The hardest part came the following Sunday. Lila texted first. "Hey, Nana, are you coming by today?" I stared at the screen for a long time, then replied, "Not today, sweetie, but I hope you have a lovely brunch." Julie didn't text. I don't think she noticed. Or maybe she did and didn't know what to say. I went to the farmer's market that morning, bought fresh pears and a wedge of aged Gouda. I sat on a bench overlooking the bay and ate quietly, watching sailboats bob in the distance. It was the first Sunday in years I hadn't spent in that house. The world did not fall apart. I made a list that night. Things I had put off for years: learning watercolor, visiting Maine in the fall, replacing the worn floor lamp in the reading room, writing postcards to old friends. I looked at the list and didn't feel guilty. I felt ready. In the days that followed, there were small ripples. The joint subscription accounts I had managed began to send notifications. Card declined. Update billing information. Access expired. Nothing malicious. Just the natural result of a shifting center. I didn't respond to the messages that followed. David asked if I'd changed something in the shared family Dropbox. Yes, I texted back. You may want to create your own copy going forward. No apology, no explanation. Just a clean line. Julie eventually noticed the financial changes. She emailed the advisor. He referred her back to the documentation I'd left. I imagine she was confused, maybe a little unsettled, but I wasn't trying to create a storm. I was simply walking away from the weather pattern I'd spent decades tolerating. One evening, I sat with a cup of tea reading a collection of Mary Oliver poems. The line that stayed with me was this: "Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" For years, I had believed the answer had to include sacrifice. That love meant giving up yourself until there was nothing left but service. But I was beginning to believe something else: that you can love people deeply and still decide to protect your own peace. That walking away doesn't mean you've stopped caring. It just means you've started caring for yourself, too. That week, I booked a small retreat on the coast. Just 3 days. A room with a view, meals served quietly, no itinerary. I didn't tell anyone. I simply packed a bag and went. It was the first time in over 30 years I had taken a vacation alone. I walked the shore barefoot. I painted clumsy watercolors of the sea. I wrote a letter to myself. It began, "You are not an afterthought." And for the first time in a long while, I believed it. It took a week for them to notice. The first sign was subtle, a message from David, my son, sent at 7:42 a.m. "Hey mom, do you know why my health insurance payment didn't go through? It usually auto-deducts from the shared account." I stared at the message for a moment, then replied simply, "I no longer manage the shared account. You'll need to update your billing info." No smiley face, no signature, just the fact. An hour later, another message came from Julie. She'd never liked surprises. "Well, why is the Dropbox folder locked? I can't access Lila's school paperwork." I didn't reply right away. I made my tea first. I let Luna, my cat, climb into my lap and settle. Then I wrote back, "The folder is no longer active. You may want to create your own copy." 3 hours passed before the third ping came, this time from Julie's husband, Mark. "Hi, Carol. I think there's been some confusion with the financial subscriptions. Netflix and Spotify are both down, and the Hulu account is asking for a new card." I smiled a little at that one. It was always the streaming services that caused the panic. I didn't respond. That evening, the group chat titled Family Central lit up. "Julie, has anyone spoken to Mom? Something's going on." "David?" "Yeah, she said she's not managing the shared stuff anymore." "Julie? What does that mean, David?" "It means she's done." I imagined the expression on her face as she read that. Confused, perhaps even annoyed, but not yet worried. The next day, the real unraveling began. Julie went to the grocery store and tried to use the family card, the one I'd opened for household needs a decade ago. It declined. The manager had to pull her aside. She called me right from the parking lot. "Mom, something's wrong with the family account." I answered this time, my voice calm. "It's closed, Julie." She was silent for a beat. "Why I removed myself. I no longer participate in those arrangements." "Why would you do that without telling us?" "Because it was never truly a conversation before. I didn't think this would be different." "You could have at least warned me," she snapped. "I could have," I said. "But then I would have been talked out of it." She hung up without saying goodbye. That evening, I received a flurry of messages, Julie asking for passwords, David asking about the tax forms, Mark offering to talk things out. I didn't reply. I spent the day reorganizing my closet instead, sorting through old coats, forgotten scarves, the shoes I kept for events I never truly enjoyed. It felt good, practical, liberating. By Thursday, they realized I was serious. I received a formal email from the family's estate lawyer asking if I truly intended to revoke my co-trustee status. "Yes," I replied, effective immediately. Friday brought a knock at my door. I opened it to find David standing there. He looked older than I remembered, tired in a way that success and nice suits couldn't hide. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, David. Can I come in?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. He sat at the dining table like he used to as a boy. He glanced around at the neatness, the quiet, the absence of chaos. "We're confused," he said. "I imagine you are. You've always been the glue. You kept everything running." I poured us both tea. He didn't touch his. "That was my choice," I said. "But choices can change." He exhaled, rubbing his temple. "Did something happen?" "Something specific." I studied him for a moment. No one event, just a realization. He waited. That I was contributing to a system where I mattered only when useful. "I don't want to be part of that system anymore. But we love you. Then perhaps it's time to show it in ways that don't rely on my labor." He looked down. When he left, he hugged me longer than usual. By Saturday, Julie finally called, not to demand, but to ask. "Are you okay?" she said, her voice small. "I'm fine. Are you angry? No. Then why are you doing this?" "I'm choosing peace," I said. "It just doesn't look the way you expected." There was silence on the line. Then, "We're having brunch tomorrow. Will you come? I think I'll pass this time." A pause. "We miss you." I didn't say anything. Sunday came. I spent the morning planting herbs, basil, rosemary, mint, my fingers in the soil, my knees in the sun. It felt honest. That afternoon, I received photos in the group chat. Lila holding a pancake, Julie smiling beside her, David with his dog, Mark pouring orange juice. No caption, no message. I looked at the photos, then set my phone face down. I made a simple dinner, watched the light fade over the horizon, and for the first time in years, I didn't wonder what they were saying about me when I wasn't there. Because I finally understood something: silence is not always absence. Sometimes it is strength. Sometimes it is the sound of a woman returning to herself. 2 months passed before I saw their faces again. I had expected it to come sooner, some form of formal intervention, or perhaps an angry group message with exclamation points and bold fonts. But what arrived instead was softer, more measured. A handwritten note from Julie. It was slipped under my door on a Tuesday morning. Mom, we'd like to come by this weekend. Saturday, if you're open to it. Just talk. No expectations. Love, Julie. I stared at the letter for a long time. I didn't answer right away. I went about my day, walked to the library, returned a scarf I had bought on impulse, sat alone at the little French cafe on 9th Street where no one ever asked about family. By Thursday, I replied. Saturday at 3. I'll have tea ready. They came as promised, all 4 of them. Julie, David, Mark, and Lila. Julie brought lemon bars, the kind I used to bake for their birthdays. Mark carried a bouquet of wildflowers. David held a bottle of wine he knew I liked. Layla, awkward and unsure, offered a card that said, "We love Grandma," in crayon. I accepted all of it, politely, gently, without offering too much. We sat in the living room. I had set the space as I would for guests not family. Cushions, straightened napkins, folded the good china used without ceremony. No one spoke at first. The silence wasn't hostile, just unfamiliar, like a stage waiting for the curtain to rise. Julie finally broke it. Mom, we didn't come to argue. That's good, I said, because I no longer host arguments. She gave a tight smile. We just didn't understand why it all changed so suddenly. I sipped my tea. It didn't change suddenly. You just didn't notice it until I did something visible. Mark nodded slowly. That's fair. David looked uncomfortable. I think we've taken you for granted. I didn't reply. Julie leaned forward. The brunch, what I said, I was trying to be funny. It came out all wrong. I looked at her, not with anger, but with clarity. You said, we're just being nice, including you. Don't think you matter. She winced. I didn't mean, but you did, I said quietly. Or part of you did. And that part has been speaking for a long time. Mark shifted in his seat. Lila looked down at her shoes. I didn't come today to ask for apologies. I continued. I came because you asked to come. And that's a start. Julie's voice wavered. You're our mother. You're the reason we have anything. We were wrong to treat you as support staff. I allowed myself a small laugh. Support staff? That's a new one. I mean it, David said. We were so used to you holding everything together we didn't notice when you stopped smiling. I looked at my son, the one I raised with such care, who once held my hand in grocery stores and whispered secrets only to me. I don't want to be the glue anymore, I said. I want to be the person, whole, separate, not useful, but valued. Mark spoke gently. We've been having conversations, the 4 of us, about what we've done, about how blind we were. And I asked. We're sorry, Julie said. Not just for brunch, for years of assuming you'd always be there to clean up after us. I nodded. Thank you for saying it. There was another silence, this one softer, sadder. Lila broke it. Grandma, are you still mad? I turned to her. No, sweetheart. I'm not mad. I was hurt. That's different. She crawled into my lap without asking. I held her close, brushing her hair back. I love you, she whispered. I love you too. Julie's voice was quieter now. What happens next? That depends, I said, on whether you want me in your life because I'm your mother or because I'm useful. We want you because you're you, David said quickly. I looked at each of them, letting my eyes linger. I'm living differently now. I take painting classes, I dance, I sleep in. I don't check family spreadsheets at midnight. Julie smiled. Good. I don't want to go back to how things were. That role, it nearly erased me. Mark leaned forward. We understand. Or we're trying to. I won't manage your lives anymore, I said. I won't be the silent engine in the background. If you want me around, ask me. Invite me. But don't expect me. Julie nodded. We hear you. Truly. David cleared his throat. Would you consider coming to Thanksgiving this year as a guest? Not as the cook. I smiled. If there's wine and someone else does the dishes, I might. They laughed. Genuinely. Before they left, Julie hugged me. Not the quick, distracted hug of recent years, but a longer rooted one. A daughter to her mother. A woman to another woman. You matter, Mom, she said into my ear. I'm sorry I ever made you doubt that. I whispered back. I never asked to be the center. I only wanted to be treated like I belong. Her shoulders shook slightly, but she said nothing more. As they walked down the steps, Lila waved, holding the crayon card high. And for the first time in months, I waved back with something real in my chest. Not forgiveness, perhaps, but peace. The quiet after their visit felt different from the silences that had come before. It wasn't heavy. It wasn't lonely. It was full of something I hadn't felt in years. Breath. For the first time in decades, I wasn't holding my body like a wall. I didn't feel the weight of responsibility coiled in my back or the sting of being overlooked behind my eyes. I was simply here, myself, still, and it was enough. The days moved gently after that. I didn't expect them to call every day, and they didn't, but I did receive a message from Julie that next morning. Thanks for yesterday. I meant what I said. Also, Mark wants to take you to lunch next week. Just you and him. No spreadsheets, he promises. I replied, tell him he'd better not. It was light. It was human. It was new. But I didn't wait around for their next move. I had plans of my own. I signed up for a painting class at the community center 3 blocks from my apartment. Monday mornings, 10 a.m. I bought a little box of acrylic paints and a stack of blank canvases, even though I had no idea what I was doing. My hands trembled the first time I held a brush. Not because I was afraid of failing, but because I wasn't doing this for anyone but me. My teacher was a soft-spoken man named Luis, probably in his 70s. He looked at my chaotic mess of color that first day and said, "That's bold. Don't lose that." I smiled the whole walk home. On Wednesdays, I went to the dance class I used to daydream about. Intro to Ballroom. I wore soft shoes and kept to the back, at first unsure. But by the 4th week, I had a favorite partner, Eleanor, a widow like me who twirled like the years never touched her. We didn't talk much. We just laughed. And that was enough. Sometimes on sunny afternoons, I sat in the little park down the street and sketched with charcoal. Other times, I walked to the corner bookstore and lost myself among titles with quiet covers, books that didn't shout for attention, just waited to be discovered. I met someone too. Well met might be the wrong word. Henry had lived in the building across from mine for years. A widower quiet, kept to himself. We'd nodded in elevators before, once or twice exchanged complaints about the slow mail service. Now we talked. Actually talked. We had coffee. We shared old records. He told me about his late wife's garden and how he'd kept her lilies blooming. I told him about my failed lemon tree and how I never quite got it to fruit. It wasn't romance, not yet. But it was connection, gentle, unforced, like two trees leaning toward the same patch of sun. Julie started calling more often, not out of panic or to ask for help, but to talk. She sent photos of Lila's drawings and once a picture of the dinner she made using one of my old recipes. Not as good as yours, she wrote, but I'm trying. Mark took me to lunch, just as promised. We didn't talk finances. We talked memories, childhood vacations, my husband's terrible puns, the time we all got food poisoning in Tahoe and swore never to eat gas station sandwiches again. David emailed me a link to an online course in financial education. Thought of you. They're looking for volunteers to mentor single moms. No pressure, just in case you're interested. I signed up, but not to prove anything, not to gain favor, just because I wanted to. Slowly they came back, one by one. And this time they came not because I held the keys to the house or the passwords to their accounts, but because they wanted to know me, the person, not the provider. But I didn't make myself too available. That old reflex to stretch myself thin for their comfort was gone. I went to family dinners when I wanted to. I skipped them when I needed quiet. I brought a dish if I felt inspired, not out of obligation. I said no without apology. And over time, they learned that version of me. The woman with paint on her hands, a dance card full of Wednesdays, and a cat named Rose who slept on my pillow. They learned to love her. Or maybe finally they saw who had been there all along. Sometimes the ones we give everything to. Forget we're not furniture. We don't speak, we don't shout, we don't demand space. We just stand quietly where we're placed. We hold the weight. We carry the coats. We're there in every picture, but rarely at the center of the frame. That was me. And I don't say that with bitterness anymore. I say it with clarity, with softness, with something that took me 66 years to learn. I am not here just to be useful. There is a deep, slow ache that comes from being needed, but never truly seen. From being thanked, but not respected. From being included, conditionally. When it's convenient, when it's tradition, when it costs nothing. That brunch, that sentence from Julie. It didn't wound me because it was loud. It wounded because it was true. They were just being nice, including me. They didn't think I mattered. But the silence that followed, that long, loaded silence when no one spoke, when no one defended me. That was the moment I realized I had been waiting for something they could never give me. Permission to belong. And so I stopped waiting. I didn't slam doors. I didn't scream or send angry letters. I didn't demand apologies or post poetic rage on Facebook. I just stepped back, quietly, with dignity. And I let the absence speak. I let them feel the edges of my presence by noticing its withdrawal. And slowly, like a tide receding after a storm, I found myself again. Not the mother, not the helper, not the reliable backup singer to their shiny lives. Just me. I painted terrible canvases and danced to old Frank Sinatra songs with a woman who used to choreograph for Broadway. I laughed with a man who still wears cologne to the grocery store. I ate alone in cafes and didn't feel lonely. I made eye contact with the mirror and said, "You're doing just fine." And one day, Julie looked at me and said, "You've changed." No, I hadn't. I had just returned to myself. It took walking away from the table to realize I had set the entire feast and still gone hungry. So to anyone out there listening to the quiet ones, the ones who always bring the extra chair, always remember the birthdays, always smooth over the tensions, I want to say this: you matter. Not because you're useful, not because you've earned your place by bending over backwards, not because someone finally said thank you, but because you exist, because your heart beats and your soul feels, because you are whole even when others only see the parts of you that serve them. If someone ever says, "Don't think you matter, don't argue, don't beg, step back," and let the silence speak. Let your absence teach the lesson your presence never could. Because sometimes the most radical thing a woman can do is live for herself, with peace, with grace, with full awareness of her worth. I'm not bitter. I'm free.